The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of its hosts, guests, or callers, and do not necessarily represent the opinions of WTBR-FM, its management, other producers, or sponsors.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM Pittsville with Roberta McCulloch-Dews. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have with us Betsy Strickler. She is a marketing, communications, and business development consultant with expertise in education. But most recently, Betsy served as the Chief Communications Officer at Community Health Programs. She previously worked as Director of External Relations for Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, and she was the Director of Admission at Darrow School and Director of Sales and Marketing at Jiminy Peak Mountain Resort. Where have you not worked?
Thanks.
How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. You look well.
It's been a good spring so far. So
good. You know, I'm so grateful that we're actually getting some nice weather.
Oh, yeah.
Although I have to say that they've been teasing us with warm weather, at least for this couple of few days. And I don't know if it's been as warm.
No.
As they say.
Yeah. It's okay, though. It's spring.
It is.
It's the Berkshires.
It is.
And we are above freezing.
So are you saying then that we should look on the bright side?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm definitely a glass half full.
I agree. All right. I'll agree with that. All right. So you really have had quite the array of positions and fields. And before we get into a little bit about your background and your passions, what you're doing now and where you want to go, let's talk a little bit about where you grew up. Yeah. So you're not a native of the Berkshires.
No, I came here in the early 2000s.
Okay. And where did you hail from right before you got here?
Oh, right before I got here, I was at Northfield Mount Hermon School.
Okay.
In the tiny little town of Northfield.
Oh.
Which I joke a little bit that I moved from one town with 0 stoplights to another town with 0 stoplights, which was Stockbridge. But Northfield Mount Hermon School is just about 30 minutes north of Northampton.
Oh, okay.
Got a lot of Norths in there.
Okay.
And I was college counseling and a dorm parent.
A dorm parent.
I was in charge of the teenage 9th grade girls on my floor, which was super fun, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of 14-year-olds living right down the hall from me.
They'll keep you on your toes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Well, okay, so education, and you seem to like the small town vibe.
I do.
Okay.
You know, I lived in Pittsfield for a few years, and now I'm down in Lee.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Lancaster, PA, which at the time was not nearly as big as it is now.
Okay.
But definitely, I'm not a big city. I love to visit.
Okay.
I like to spend time in the big cities, but I like to know people.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into like the Lancaster, PA, vibe and how it was growing up there. But I got to agree with you. I've been away from New York City for several years now. And when I go back to visit, it's nice, but then I want to come back home. And there was once a time in my life when I thought I'd never leave the city. I wanted that fast pace. I wanted that hustle and bustle. And I think in your 20s, you think there's so much happening, you don't want to miss it. And then you realize that there's so much more. You don't necessarily need to be in the vortex of all of that. And there are other things that are so valuable. Like you actually value peace and quiet.
Yes.
Right? There was once a time when you'd say, why is it so quiet? What's happening? What's not happening? Now it's like, yeah. I like when it's quiet. I actually like just like courtesy and those kind of things. And I guess if you don't have it growing up all the time and you get to experience it later, you have an appreciation for it. But you always had it in Lancaster.
Yes.
So tell me, how was life for you growing up in Lancaster?
Oh, we were very much sort of middle-class suburbia land.
Okay.
I know we were joking before this conversation, and no, I am not Amish.
It was me. I asked her, I said, do a lot of people say you're from Lancaster, a lot of Amish folks? And that's what I kind of recall.
Yeah. But it was really amazing to grow up with people we know who are Amish, and have that understanding of just the different cultural way of life and the respect for that, and the hard work and simplicity, but the values that they hold.
Did you have Amish friends?
I wouldn't say friends. My grandmother had Amish friends.
Oh.
Just because my grandmother was an amazing woman and made friends with everybody.
Okay.
And we had connections and family and, and people.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, hey, let's go hang out with Sadie and Enos this weekend.
The worlds
right?
had to kind of be separate, right? A little bit?
Yeah. But that being said, people we know at the Central Market. So that was sort of a way of life in Lancaster. Is on Tuesdays and Fridays, you go to the market to buy your fresh produce, your fresh meats, and often those farmers selling the goods were Amish.
Oh.
And so getting, every single week for whatever, my parents got to know the people, and, so we definitely had relationships with them, but I wouldn't say friendships.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially considering that just the nature of the culture, right, and the community, and the way of life.
Yeah.
So certainly made sense. Growing up, did you have favorite activities and things you like to do in Lancaster?
Oh, gosh. I would try lots of things, if that makes sense. So,
okay.
Like I was on the gymnastics team for 2 years. I took horseback riding for a couple of years.
Okay.
I took piano lessons for a year. So well-rounded, if you will. But no, pretty much just ride the bikes and play dodgeball with the neighborhood kids. And
so pretty much when you think about small town Americana where everyone knows everyone and you're riding your bike and you can wave and the neighbor and the neighbors know you, how did it feel to grow up in a community where everyone knew you? I'm sure that there are benefits, and then I'm sure you're probably like, I wish you didn't know me right now. Like, I kind of just want to be anonymous. Can you not know me?
Yes. Well, and we lived in the same house growing up forever and ever, so same neighborhood, all of that. I mean, Lancaster today is much bigger, but it was not small, if you will. So I graduated, I think there were over 300 in my class in high school.
That's decent.
And there were 7 other high schools. So...
Wait, 7 other high schools?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not talking any small town here.
Tiny, no. But
yeah,
definitely neighborhoods.
Yeah. Okay.
That sort of thing.
Okay.
So,
all right. And so growing up, you had siblings?
I have a younger sister.
Okay.
She now lives in just outside of Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay.
And just the 2 of us. And then later in life, got some awesome step siblings. Yeah,
that's like my brother. I have 1 brother, so definitely understand the power of 2.
Yes.
And when you're growing up too, especially with a sibling, and it's just the 2 of you, I know for my brother we had just a closeness because that was it. That was it. But it seems to me that Lancaster pretty much provided this amazing backdrop for you. You had this great home life. You had this great experience. You were exposed to another culture, and you probably weren't even aware of it at the time, but you were exposed to another way of life. And I'm sure probably you were learning lessons of difference and things like that, even before you even knew.
Before any knowledge.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And my, and my parents were often doing things out in the community and saying, okay, guess what you're doing? You're helping out this, that, the other thing. So, I think you're right. There were these opportunities that as a kid, you just aren't aware.
Right. It's like osmosis. You're sometimes, I liken it to, now as adults, we're able to look back and we're able to understand a lot of things. But sometimes when you're in it, you don't even realize the lessons that are being imparted at the time,
So
or
true.
like how you just took something for granted and you're like, wow, that's what that meant. So you have this great background growing up in Lancaster, but then you leave.
Then you leave.
What happened?
And I love Lancaster, and I love being from Lancaster. But after, we spent every summer of our lives going to Maine, to this tiny little island with no roads, no cars, no stores, 40 houses. Talk about quiet. And so after college, I went to school down in Maryland, but after college, it was, okay, I'm going to my happy place, and I'm going to Maine. So I lived on the island for the summer and waited tables, went by boat to wait tables at a restaurant. And when I was in college, well, I should back up a little bit. In high school, my plan was to be the ambassador to Switzerland.
Okay.
That was my career goal.
Oh, you got to explain that one.
I don't know. I have no idea where that came from. I was a political science major.
Ooh,
my family was German. Somehow I just decided.
And Switzerland got in your head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
somehow that was the plan.
Okay.
Went to school, did an internship in Washington, D.C., and said, no, I don't like this.
Don't like politics?
Don't
or-
like politics, don't like Washington, D.C., or the commute. That I think that's why I stayed away from the big cities.
Yeah.
Just the commute and the...
It's a hustle and bustle.
Yeah.
And
it
a
wasn't me.
grind.
It wasn't me. And
Yeah.
so after that...
When did you know that, Betsy? Like, when did you have that epiphany to say, this is not me? Were you like traveling on a bus somewhere or on the metro and you're like, mm-mm.
I don't know the exact, or I don't remember the exact moment, but yeah, it was drive 45 minutes, get on the T, go, or, their version of the metro. And I just, after 2 months, I said, So I went back to school and the internship was over and everything was great. But I literally just had this, not a meltdown, but this moment of, I'm a junior in college and I'm a political science major and I have no idea what I'm going to do now.
You were terrified.
I was a little terrified and I definitely had some meltdowns, there's no doubt. But through all of that, I had been doing volunteer work in the admissions office. My work-study job was in the admissions office, and I just loved spending time there. And that ultimately became the basis for my career in education.
Now, what did you love about it? Because I think it takes a true, like, you have to have a gift. I always say anyone who works around young people, there has to be something that drives you to that work, because it's not for the faint of heart, and you're literally on a journey with them at their stage in life. So how did you know that was for you?
So again, at the time, I was 20.
Yeah.
So I was of that same age. But the people that are in that world of admissions and college life were just so open to teaching and sharing, and I loved the school I went to. I mean, I became sort of the poster child for Hood College, and so I think I just was like, this could be a thing. And then I went to Maine and sat, at the time, this was, eons ago, would go to Bowdoin, which is nearby, near the island, and I would go to Bowdoin College and I would sit in the library and I would read the Chronicle of Higher Ed, the employment section, and look for jobs in admissions. And the next thing you know, I had a job at the University of New England just down the road in Biddeford, Maine, in admissions. So it was sort of, this was meant to be.
Wow. Everything like lined up.
Yes. Yeah.
Maine is, I've never been to Maine.
Oh, it's amazing.
If you could describe Maine and the setting, because just in the environment, obviously the school and everything attracted you to that region, but what would you say about Maine that you just love so much that pulled you from the city life and took you to your happy place. It was your happy place for a reason.
Yeah. So again, growing up, sense of community, sense of family. We spent summers on this island with 40 houses. So it's the same people. And I often refer to those people as my other parents, my other mother, my other father, my other, so having those generations to kind of raise you in the summer in this place where you can just run free because it's an island and
right.
you can't get off.
And that's pretty much it.
Right?
I mean, you can try.
Make your own fun, no televisions, no, that kind of stuff. So for me, that is what I think of as Maine. I know it's an entire ginormous state.
Yeah.
But I ended up actually living in Portland, which is the biggest city in Maine.
So that's quite the difference now. So you have this respite that you literally is like a treasure for you, and you're in Portland. Did Portland have aspects of DC?
No, much smaller.
Much smaller. Okay.
Much smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, like Georgetown of DC.
Oh,
if
okay.
you will.
All right. So like a little niche neighborhood kind of feel.
Yes, and being, early 20s, you can walk from your apartment to go to the bars and the shops and down to the waterfront. And so, it's definitely a sort of a way of life.
Okay.
And I would highly recommend a visit to Portland, Maine.
I do have to visit. You're not the first person to basically sing the praises of Maine. And, I hear stories about people saying, I go into the beach, and I'm like, but it's cold.
It is cold.
And I'm like,
it's very cold.
So I'm from Jamaica. I'm thinking, if I'm going to the beach, I'm going in the water where the water is warm. And I'm like, I see people that are like, I love the beach. And then you see a picture of them and they have like a hoodie on and they're walking. And I'm like, but it's cold. Why? I don't get it. But though, I think we all have those things that we're drawn to. And, having Maine as a backdrop to now you have this great experience where basically you are on the path to your career.
Yeah.
When you got this job and at the college, did you feel like I'm on my way?
I did. It sort of magically all just came together all at once. And my best friend, who grew up on this same island in the summers, but she was from Michigan, she said the same thing after college. I'm moving to Maine.
Huh.
And so we lived at her house on this island, and she said, I'm going to be a teacher, and I'm going to find a job in Maine. And she got a job about 2 weeks later at a school in the next town over. I mean, it was...
Is she still in Maine?
She still is in Maine.
Okay.
Yes, she is. So I think... Yeah, as you said, it just sort of came together and was meant to be.
Okay.
Ironically, after, and this is a bit of a pattern, but for me, one job seems to prepare me for the next job. So I'm at the University of New England. Everything is really great. I meet lots of people who work in boarding schools and are college counselors. So their job is to learn the schools. My job is to learn their students.
Right.
And somebody at one point said, you really should be a college counselor. You should flip the table and try working on this side.
Huh.
And they said, oh, this woman so-and-so is hiring at Northfield Mount Herman School. You should call her. Okay. Next thing you know, I'm working at Northfield Mount Herman School as a college counselor.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
And
this
so,
literally is the pattern of somebody suggests or there is a unique opportunity that just
But then you also
flows.
have to be able to receive it. Because what if you had said no?
Who knows?
You would have been a whole different Betsy.
I would be a whole different Betsy. I probably wouldn't know the Roberta sitting
I know.
here.
Wow, the power of a decision. But you said yes. You said yes to the opportunity, and it took you to now Mount Herman. And so what was that like for you?
So that was amazing because I didn't grow up with a boarding school background.
Yeah.
I didn't really know much about that. I knew, I had some friends that went to the local country day school and that sort of thing. So there was a learning curve.
Okay.
And when you work in a boarding school, especially as a young person in your 20s, you live in the dorm with the students.
Okay.
And so my apartment was literally 4 dorm rooms all strung together into an apartment.
Oh, okay.
And, think back to when you're in the dorm and you
Yeah.
hear everybody walking down the hall, except when you're the adult. And you know that it's midnight and you hear tiptoe down the hall, you got to get up and out of bed and yell at them.
Oh, boy. So you were dorm mom.
Dorm mom for that floor. Yeah.
For that floor.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were still kind of young yourself, but now you're in sort of this, this leadership role where you're telling them pretty much sometimes you have to say, listen,
And they're 14-year-old girls.
And they're 14. Yeah.
And they were amazing, and I'm still in touch with
But
many
see,
of
that's
them.
good, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because it really could have skewed the other way. But you had a really good set of girls.
I did. And every one of the things I think I learned and then went on to work at other boarding schools was, I had this idea that boarding school is either for those generational families of, well, everybody has gone to this school for the last 17 decades,
Right.
and,
That whole legacy.
or my parents didn't want me around, so they sent me away. And that's what I thought. And it's not that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, there are those handful unfortunate students, but for the most part, it's kids saying, and families saying, we want a different opportunity. We want a different experience.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, maybe it didn't work at their public school or their local school, but for the most part, it's families saying, we have a choice, and we're looking at options, and it's everybody does sports, everybody does art, everybody does work job type things. Education, you live with your teachers. Imagine the learning that happens.
The teachers, well,
they live in the dorms.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's like a literally built-in community.
It's a built-in community. You go to study hall at night and your English teacher is sitting in the library with you. Right?
Interesting.
You learn how to do laundry at 14 because you have to.
But can these teachers have lives outside of school? Like, can they have families? Where do the families live?
In houses on the campuses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yes, they do. They rotate. So it might be like Tuesday is my night to work in the library.
Okay.
And you get every other night free kind of thing. But
wow, what an interesting world.
It's different.
I think you brought up a good point about boarding schools because, you say boarding school and you think elitist. Right? Like that's a thing. But it's a good point that you mentioned it's about options. And I think that parents and caregivers will make the best the choices for their children. I know growing up in the city, I went to an all-girls Catholic high school.
Yeah.
And, looking back, I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to go to a regular high school. I want to be co-ed. I want to. And, but it turned out to be, it was a sacrifice. One, I'll just put out there, it was a sacrifice for my parents, but they knew that it was something, like you said, that would set the foundation. Right? And so they made the sacrifice, and I also had to make good on their work as well and do my part. But it's about those options for the future. So I totally get it. And I would think too, like boarding schools to give you an element of independence because you have to, even though you have a community set up around you, you still have to have some sort of agency and do things.
Yes.
It's on you.
Right. And when you're living with the teachers and you have an advisor who is talking to your parents on a regular basis, you do need to find your own structure, but there's also structure built in because these are teenagers. It's not like you're just saying, oh, go have at it. See you in 3 months, right? No, it's, it's very structured.
So you have this experience as dorm mom, as this, you're in this great role. And then what? Because I'm following the trajectory here, Betsy, of one position leads to the next and leads to the next. So when was the next aha moment for you when you said, my time at Mount Hermon is up and I'm on to the next adventure?
So one of the unique challenges when you work for an independent school is that you tell them in January if you intend to leave at the end of your contract, which is June 30th.
Oh. So you have to tell them in January.
So you tell them basically 5 to 6 months in advance.
That's
and
awkward.
It's a little bit terrifying, but it's also the culture. So it's, okay, we have these, in a staff of 50, we have these 4 leaving and these 3 positions opening and whatever. But I had gotten to a point where I said, I love college counseling, but there's no growth for me. And I always want to be learning and doing and achieving something new.
Right.
So there's always learning because it's new students and it's new faculty and it's new everything.
Right.
But I also had gotten to that point where I said, okay, it's been 3 years and I've learned a ton, but what do I do next?
So you were feeling kind of like, were you feeling like an internal tug or pull to say?
I think so. Sort of the what's next.
Yeah.
Again,
how do these things just keep happening for you, Betsy?
I'm very fortunate in this. Not to say that I don't work very hard for whatever is coming.
Yes.
But because you alert ahead of time, they start cycling in people to hire for your job. I was part of the review process. A woman came in and said, oh my gosh, I want this job. So she went through the interview process. I'm the last person they met just to sort of say, tell me about the kids or tell me whatever. And she said, but I just was offered a position at this school in the Berkshires. But I'm going to decline it and tell them to call you. Next thing you know, I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at Miss Hall's School.
Did she really say that?
She really did. So I came to the Berkshires, to Pittsfield, to work at Miss Hall's School.
What year was that?
I knew you were going to ask that. It was in 2001.
Okay.
2001 or 2002.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So the next thing you know, I'm on the admissions side. So I went from college admissions to college counseling at a boarding school. Now I'm in the admissions of a boarding school, right? So there's this seeing all sides of admissions and financial aid and kind of understanding all of that. But when I came to Miss Hall's, I did not need to live in the dorm.
Okay.
I was happy about that. So I moved to Stockbridge and had a great little apartment, and it was super fun. So.
Okay. Wow. So your first impression of the Berkshires, do tell.
Loved. Just loved.
Yeah.
I think, I came in with this fresh, here I am. And just the people that I met and just kept meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting. And again, Miss Hall's built-in community.
Yes.
Again. So you have this quote-unquote friend group that you can base everything off of.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure how I just kept meeting people. I did have that solid, one person that I was really close with, and it just kept building from there. Yeah.
I could see, I feel like the Berkshires is made for that. It really is a special place. And it's like a domino effect when one person leads to another person. And then you're like, oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so. It's the whole, 6 degrees of separation? Was it Kevin Bacon kind of thing?
Kevin Bacon, and we all have 1 degree of him or 2.
Exactly, right? Because the whole connection to
Stockbridge.
It's Stockbridge, right? I was going to say Sheffield, but Stockbridge. So there's actually literal truth to that whole separation thing here. But you're absolutely right. The Berkshires is a magical place. So I'm not surprised that you fell in love. And plus, you also had roots in the whole Americana kind of thing. So it was an easy fit. And you ended up, because there are so many different roles that you ended up having here, and we don't have to go into every single one, but you ended up really going into a number of different industries. Would you say then that for each of them, you sort of had that little nugget of that aha moment that said, hey, this could be for you?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I think as you mentioned just a little bit ago, being open to those suggestions, even if it doesn't work out, or even if you decide no after the fact, just be open.
Yeah. I think sometimes, especially, so I was talking to someone and they were saying, like, women in particular, like, if we don't have every single thing on that the position is calling for, we will automatically disqualify ourselves and say, nope, I can't do it. And we take ourselves out of the running.
So true.
And sometimes you just never know. You have to start with, why not? So it seems like you led with a why not mindset, and you put yourself out there, because when I look at your resume, you have such a wide array of positions and things that you're interested in, but you didn't stay in education. You left.
And then I went back.
And then you went back. And then you went back.
Yeah.
Oh.
But again, at Miss Hall's, what I found I was really loving was the promotional side of it.
Okay.
Setting up the school fairs, working on the website, being in charge of the print material. And that was what I realized. I loved helping people, and I loved the connections with the families. And is this a good fit or is this not? That's, But what I just kept getting drawn into was what ultimately became marketing and my career in marketing.
So was it by, like, almost you were doing it and you're like, I'm just doing the thing, but I didn't put a label on the thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the head of school at the time was just this brilliant woman. And so she took me under her wing a little bit because she had a solid sense of brand and strategy and all of that. And so I worked on, like I said, Betsy, go out and get us a new website. Okay, how do we do that, right? But it just one thing leads to another.
I love the idea about the new skills development. That's like one of the best ways to learn. Sometimes if you don't have like a precursor, and sometimes if you just go into it and you do it. And I feel like this conversation too, especially around this time of year when we have some of our graduates and we have people going out, young people going out into the world, and other people who have attained different academic achievements, and that idea of, just doing it. Do the thing, do the thing. And from what I'm gathering from you too, Betsy, is being open to the possibility of a new thing.
Yes. And if I could give any advice to any of those graduates, is just say yes.
Yeah.
You can always change your mind. You can always stop.
Yeah.
Just say yes.
Did you find yourself having conversations? You have been in so many environments where you've had, the ear of young people. What would you say are some of the things they would ask you about, like to get your wisdom on?
That's a good question. I think some of it wasn't necessarily being asked, but it was listening to what they were saying and translating that a little bit, because you can read into, so if you're on the admissions side, I would interview 14, 13-year-olds or 18-year-olds. And when you ask the question of, what would you like to know, kind of thing, they just, I don't need to know anything, right?
Right.
But I often would ask the question, two different ones. One, if your best friend was sitting here with me, how would they describe you? And do you agree? Because that gets them opening up. Like, it's not me talking about myself. It's my friend. Right? So that was just little tricks on ways to open up. And then also, what didn't I ask that you wanted me to ask you?
Yeah, for sure. Those, especially at that age, it's hard. It's hard to get information out. So I like the strategy of listening, but also flipping the script around the questions. You shifted from education, you shifted into, different realms. Jiminy Peak. I mean, so I have to ask. It's like the end of the spectrum from college environment. What was going on at Jiminy Peak? Like, tell me about that.
So I was actually working for Winstanley Associates advertising agency. And Jiminy was a client.
Okay.
So that's how that transition, right?
There's that whisper again.
There's the whisper. And so I went in for an interview, and Brian Fairbank, just an hour later, he basically said, "We're hiring you." I was like, "What? Wait, what?
What?"
It was pretty magical.
Wow.
And so, to this day, I say Brian, and he knows I say this, but best boss ever. And then I had the opportunity to work with Tyler later.
Yeah.
And just a great opportunity, very much family business, but also very smart business people.
Okay.
And again, willing to share and learn and do. So again, my need to learn was fulfilled there. And they, Brian especially was the one who said, okay, you have really great instincts, but you have to learn the financial side and the data to support your gut.
Right.
And so for 7.5 years, I learned the business side.
That's how long you were there.
Yeah, almost 8 years.
What a shift from the education and the soft touch and the how are you and tell me about the
let's go make snow.
Right to wow. But I especially again around this time of year, but the building of the portfolio, the skills, the expertise, everything, and that comes from trying those new opportunities.
I also don't ski.
No skiing.
I don't ski.
That's okay. I don't ski either.
So it was always fun to be the marketing person for a ski resort.
Well, did you feel like you had to ski?
No, but I did take lessons and I liked it.
As long as you posed in the ski outfit and you just
could talk about skiing like I was the best skier
But
ever.
come on, Betsy, we need you to stand like you're going to go down the hill. And then as soon as the shoot is over, then you just drop everything and say,
I was
okay,
one with the photographer at the bottom of the hill, letting others ski. You can't fake skiing. If you're a good skier, you are a good skier.
And you really can't fake it because you want to live.
Right. I did have some phenomenal lessons, though, for sure.
Well, is there any reason why that you didn't want to was it fear of the heights?
I think so. It wasn't fear of heights. I have this desire, and I think you will relate to this. I don't like being out of control. And I didn't feel I was a good enough skier to always be in control.
That's good.
Right?
That's good.
So I didn't grow up skiing. We went once a year to...
Because you were in Maine.
The Poconos. Well, I was in Pennsylvania.
Right. All right.
So,
exactly. There's no skiing out there.
No, so we would go once a year to the Poconos and, no. It wasn't very good.
I don't even want to tell you my memories of what I remember about the Poconos. Was Mount Airy Lodge there? Is that...
Mount Airy Lodge? That sounds very familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a total throwback. There's a commercial. The Poconos are so 80s.
Yes.
They're so 80s. And there used to be a commercial about Mount Airy Lodge. I'm just trying to...
the honeymoon capital or something?
Yeah, and here's what I remember. A big champagne glass that people could go... So random. So random. I know this. They're we're talking skiing and now we're talking the champagne glass at Mount Airy Lodge, but it's interesting to me just your desire to try new things, put yourself in a position to learn new things. But we see that beyond your professional, Betsy, you actually have some passions. Tell me about the passions, what drives you, because there's the work element, but there's also the community aspect, and you became very involved, and you still are very involved in the Berkshires. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think, again, it goes back to childhood and everything else, and my parents were often doing volunteer work. Again, I didn't necessarily know that's what it was. It was, hey, my dad's running the chicken barbecue at the Sertoma Club in Lancaster. Okay, and we're going to hand out little boxes of orange drink or whatever. That's what we did, right?
Right.
Or mom was part of the League of Women Voters, and she would work at the polls every year, and so that's what we did. We helped. So that idea of giving back was just ingrained. My grandmother worked for the Y and volunteered at the Y, and she volunteered with elderly, disabled.
Yes.
And so it was just this way of being where you give back even if you didn't feel you were part of the community. That's just what you do.
Yes.
But I think through that, you are part of the community.
You are.
Yeah. And so when I came here to the Berkshires, again, just getting to know people, but through Berkshire Leadership Program, I really started understanding the Berkshires and seeing different aspects of it and just finding ways of, sure, I'll help.
What did that program reveal for you on a deeper level?
Well, I think the beauty of it is that it shows you so many aspects of the Berkshires, from North County, down south, and everything from government to not-for-profits to for-profits. And, and the whole goal when that was started was to create this stable of people who were ready to volunteer on boards and volunteer. So I was a sucker, and it was perfect for me, and I loved it. And I met so many people, people to this day that still connected, and you're a graduate,
You know what? I'm not, but
let's get you in.
My colleague, Catherine, Catherine?
Yes.
So Catherine, I remember Catherine always saying, it's a BLP. She was actually like in leadership positions for BLT, wasn't she? Like
on the steering committee.
And I think she led it at one point. She was really high up there. And I remember, when I was, at the mayor's office, and I remember coming in and Catherine's like, I'm on a Zoom. And I'm like, I just don't need to walk by her desk at that moment. But I knew of BLP through her.
Okay.
And I would see the planning, I would see the work that went into that, and just a phenomenal thing. But what I have noticed is the cohorts, they're so wide and varied.
Yes.
Like, I see what you're saying, that you're able to connect with people who maybe you wouldn't ordinarily connect with.
Never. You
Exactly.
would never see them.
And now you're part of this special cohort. Here I am doing this plug for BLP.
Good job. Thank you.
But it really is. I think tapping into those spaces that allow you to have that deeper connection. So BLP, was it for you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Before, I know our time is flying, but I want to get into, you have that BLP as a passion, but you're also involved from a health perspective in health outcomes and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's a campaign that is underway, and I don't want to say the wrong way. Faces of Naloxone?
Yes.
Faces of Naloxone.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So this is through it's actually a research grant out of National Institute of Health and the National Institute on Drug Addictions. And through opioid settlement money, yes, there was some good that came out of that. The NIH put together this research study for 4 states and basically said, if we give money to small communities that have been impacted unfortunately, by opioid addictions and substance abuse, can they make change at the grassroots level? As opposed to NIH saying, we're going to go mandate this thing. They said, what can we do at this local level? So fortunately or unfortunately, Pittsfield and North Adams were 2 communities chosen for this effort, right? So it's not something anybody wants to be chosen, but at the same time, so thankful to have this opportunity. So there's coalitions together in those 2 towns, in 2 cities, but working closely together because we are the Berkshires. And I was fortunate enough to be hired as the communications consultant for both communities.
Oh, okay.
So that's where this started for me.
Yeah.
And I have spent the last 8 months just learning so much about addiction and recovery, which I did not know much. I fully admit that. But, I have this interest in the health of our community and changing outcomes and all of that. And so one of the goals was to try and raise awareness of naloxone, which is Narcan, and to normalize it.
Right.
And to say, not a big deal. So the goal was in time to make it so normal that it's like an AED or a fire extinguisher. You know how to use it, or you can read the sign. You hope you never need it. But if you have the opportunity to save somebody's life,
Right.
Why not?
Right.
And so what we did is we created this community campaign to normalize it by choosing, quote unquote, normal people,
Right.
who are community leaders, your neighbors, your friends down the street, to say, yep, I got trained in naloxone, I carry it, not a
Right.
big deal.
Right.
And if I can save somebody's life, I can.
Right.
Because nobody can go into recovery if they've overdosed.
Right.
If they've passed away,
it's too late.
they can't.
Right.
They can't get the help. So that's the goal.
Yeah, it's excuse me. I think it's very important work, such important work. And, we actually had the pleasure.
Yes.
So we actually had the pleasure of working just on some there was a community conversation that the mayor did lead. And it was actually around the time of my transition from the office. So there was a lot that I didn't see to see how everything actually came together. But I definitely saw the passion that you had for this, Betsy. And, you mentioned something where you said that you learned a lot about like addiction and all these things through your work. And what were some of the things that were most eye-opening to you that made you say, wow?
I think and some of these things I think had been said before, but I didn't internalize it, right? Because I didn't think it impacted me, which I have since come to realize addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or cigarettes, impacts everybody. It just does. And things like addiction is not a choice, right? At some point, yes, somebody chose to try that drug or get on that medication for pain or whatever it might be.
Right.
But nobody chooses to be addicted.
To stay on it, right? Right.
Nobody chooses addiction.
Well, isn't there like a component in your brain too where
it literally changes?
It changes where you literally then your brain craves that, and so it becomes so overpowering that it can overpower that even if you don't want to.
Right. Nobody wants that.
Right. Like it's like basically drawing you.
Yeah.
It really, and that's why it requires that strong level of intervention and all the resources and supports. And you're right. Like if you haven't been affected by it, it's, the simple answer is to say, well, just stop.
Right.
Or just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Or, and get over it.
Right.
And it's like until you have a loved one or someone who you literally see them disintegrate. And you're like, you are not the person who I knew you to be. What happened?
Right.
And it's not them. It's the control that the addiction has over them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also met this amazing community of people behind the scenes who are working to support people who are going through the worst times of their life. And just seeing how many people are actually out there working in these fields is mind-blowing. So they're just amazing individuals.
I think that also that speaks to the power of our community, right? Because on the surface, people will say this or they'll say that about what, fill in the blank for the name of the community, whatever.
Right.
But you peel back the layer and you see all these people who are spending their time working really hard to do exactly what you see them doing, and no one ever knows their name.
So true.
No one ever sees them. But
true.
It's so easy to see the bad and all of that stuff, but no one ever sees that.
Right, right. And I think also I just recently had this moment. It was literally just a couple of weeks ago, and I realized how far I have come as a human, where I was outside of an establishment in Pittsfield, and I was getting ready to go in and meet some people, and I could see out of the corner of my eye this gentleman who was just kind of standing there looking defeated, and I saw him look at me and start to walk over. And 6 or 8 months ago, I think I would have sped up quickly and walked in the door, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's coming to ask me for something, and I don't, I'm not prepared.
You got to be honest.
And he just looked at me and he said, I need to ask you a question. It's like, okay. And he laid out, his one question was laid out in a whole story.
Yeah.
Where he basically said, I have just gotten out of the House of Corrections. I am on my way to the bus stop. I am going to a recovery home in Springfield. In order to do so, I have to have 2 days prescription of a medication to help me with my addiction recovery. And I am asking you because I'm $13 short to pick up my medication prescription because my insurance doesn't start until tomorrow.
Wow.
And I'm like, he's asking me for money, but he has laid out this whole thing. And I just looked right at him and I said, I am your person. May I give you a hug?
Oh, wow.
And he said, yes. And he said, I just had somebody tell me to take fentanyl and die.
Oh, wow. Oh, gosh.
And I just, like, all of this in the last 6 months just came flooding right at me. And I said, I'm your person. And in fact, next week, I'm talking to people just like you about recovery, and we're doing some filming, and we're trying to help people like you who are struggling.
Yes.
And yes, are you comfortable getting in my car? We were going to the ATM. I got him his $13. I gave him $15.
Yeah.
And we went and got his prescription, and I took him back to the bus stop where his grandmother was bringing his 2 children to see him for 45 minutes before he got on a bus to go to a recovery house in Springfield. My whole life changed in that 20 minutes.
Talk about being open.
Right? 6 months ago, I would have walked away.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It
was so powerful.
Wow. The proximity to just what people have been going through, it opened your eyes in such a real way, because you even asked, I mean, there are some people who say, I have compassion, but I don't know if I'm letting someone in my car.
Right?
I'm like, okay, Betsy. Like,
but he opened up and just told this whole entire story that I knew he
and you
wasn't,
felt a connection.
Yeah, and I knew he wasn't scamming me.
Okay.
Like, you don't, some of the things he said, and he even mentioned the name of somebody that has been in the Pittsfield Coalition for Addiction and Recovery. So I'm like, okay, he is legit.
Yeah.
He was so specific. I am $13 short.
Right, that's very specific.
Like, he wasn't...
It wasn't like, can I just have some money? Or it was it was like down to, this is what I need it for. This is where I'm going. I need help. And, you know, from that human standpoint of, I need help. And it's that appeal to human, I need help. Yeah. And he was at his lowest.
He was he was defeated.
And you at that moment said yes. Yeah. And that was the difference between, had you taken the approach, and it wouldn't have been as far and extreme and as ugly as what that previous person had said to him.
Right.
But had you taken the approach to say no, what would have been his...
Yeah, I don't know.
We don't even know. Right. But again...
And I don't know that he got on the bus.
But you know what, though? That's not even your responsibility.
Right.
Because it's like when you give, and you give from a pure heart, you're giving.
Right.
And you know what? It's on you. If you want to scam me, if you want to like give me a story or whatever, that's on you. That's what you have to take that with you.
Right.
But you at that moment stayed open and you allowed yourself to receive and acknowledge what he had to say. I always say, if you're going to give, you give, but I give with no expectation.
Yeah.
Because you really don't know what the person's going to do. They could be telling you the truth, but maybe they're not. But your giving can't be dependent on the validity of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I said to him that I wasn't going to go out that night. I had to kind of convince myself and talk, you know, and sort of the...
Yeah.
So there was a reason I was in that parking lot at that time, and he was in that parking lot at that time.
It seems like your life, looking at your life, Betsy, that reason and those connections and those aha moments, it seems like there's a pattern for you throughout your life. And as you've shared your story today, it shows how your life, you've had those moments those conversations, the things that someone would shrug off and say, did that really happen? Did that woman really say she's not taking the job? And I'm going to say you should have it? And it did. Yeah. And you have found yourself in these interesting moments. So I'm thinking like your next steps are going to be amazing, whatever you choose to do. I don't know what it will be,
but yeah.
I think we're just waiting for the next person to tap the window on your car and say, Betsy, I have something I need to tell you about, because it seems like that's where your life, you've kept an open door. Mm-hmm. And so I'm convinced that the next chapter is going to be equally as amazing.
Well, thank you. I hope.
I think so.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. So a little over a year ago, I launched into consulting and seeing where this business would take me. Yeah. And it took me to perhaps saving somebody right? Like it gives me chills, but at the same time, I'm very blessed, and I know that, and hopefully just things keep going.
All right. Well, as we're rounding out the end of the program, I always want to give listeners, or give my guests, I should say, an opportunity to say who or what inspires them, and then the last word will be from you to say one word to describe you. We got 2 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so who inspires me? I think there's so many people, but again, I surround myself and I look up to people who are open to ideas and suggestions and opportunity, and so I don't think I would name a person. Okay. You may have heard me say my grandmother a couple of times, so she for sure influenced me. But, and then that one word, it's come up throughout, just yes.
I love it.
That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Wow. What a journey.
Yeah.
What a journey of openness, a journey of exploration and possibility. That's what I got from you.
Well, and I love this. This feels therapeutic.
Yeah.
So, and again, thank you for this opportunity, because I don't often share the journey that I've been on, nor do I really even think about it. But I do know that, as one thing leads to another, I have been very fortunate in that respect. And so thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Everyone, you've been listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM Pittsville with Roberta McCulloch-Dews. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.